How often do we witness a technological innovation that not only meets the current needs, but also foresees future challenges? Well, today I'm going to be joined by a visionary in the realm of data orchestration. His name's Nick Schrock, founder and CTO of a company called Dagster Labs. And Nick's journey from a principal engineer and director at Facebook, where he was pivotal in helping create GraphQL, to revolutionising data orchestration with Dagster, presents a unique perspective on technological evolution. And Dagster, I also want to learn more about how they've arrived at this critical juncture where data and ML engineering are becoming incredibly important in driving decision-making in businesses and beyond. But what led Nick to this path? How is Dagster helping shape the future of data workflows? Now, before I get today's guest on, a quick shout out to the sponsors of Tech Talks Daily, because in today's remote-first world, I think settling for outdated managed file transfer solutions means ultimately you're risking your sensitive data. But if you upgrade to Kiteworks, the gold standard in secure MFT, boasting FedRAMP moderate authorization, Kiteworks isn't just secure, it's a complete transformation of how your business handles file transfers and communications. And with this state-of-the-art file sharing, email security, and a platform that's as robust as it is user-friendly, Kiteworks is empowering you to manage and protect your data like never before. So say goodbye to compromise and hello to unmatched security and efficiency. And you can do that by making the switch to kiteworks.com. Visit kiteworks.com to begin. That's kiteworks.com to secure your data and empower your business. But now, let's get today's guest on. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to New York, where Nick is waiting to talk with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Nick Schrock. I'm the CTO and founder of Dagster Labs, the company behind Dagster, the data orchestration framework.
Fantastic. Well, there's so much I want to talk with you about today because I always like to find out a little bit more about my guest's origin story and their journey that they've been on to what they're doing now. And can you describe your journey from Facebook to founding Dagster Labs and also what inspired you to focus on solving data infrastructure challenges? There's got to be a story there, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off with Facebook. I joined Facebook in 2009, and, within a couple of years there, I had effectively been very involved, created this team called Product Infrastructure, which was to make our application developers more efficient and productive. So what that meant is that we built internal tools and frameworks that served our product engineers, the people who are actually building a website or building a mobile app, et cetera. And, we did a lot of really important work internally, and we ended up externalizing a bunch of that work through open source projects. So that is a team that created React, for example, which is now the most broadly used, JavaScript framework in UI programming. And then I didn't have anything to do with React, but I was kind of across the proverbial hall from them. And then I was much more involved on Facebook's data fetching stack, and that ended up becoming GraphQL, which I was the initial tech lead on and co-wrote the spec, which got open sourced in 2015. So I've kind of lived and breathed dev tools and developer productivity and developer infrastructure for a long time. I left 2017 and I was figuring out what to do next. And I was talking to companies both inside and outside the Valley, kind of in a beginner's mindset way, asking them what their biggest technical liabilities were. Like, what in your mind is the biggest kind of engineering obstacle for you achieving business outcomes? And what kept on coming up over and over again with remarkable consistency was this notion of data and ML infrastructure. And as I kind of investigated and looked into it, like I was adjacent to these issues when I was at Facebook, but I didn't work directly on them. And, it fit a lot of the properties of problems that I care about a lot. So, kind of a few things need to be true. One, they're like engineers in pain. Like when I see engineers who are working day to day, like becoming frustrated with their tools and their process or being unnecessarily slowed down or just living in chaos, that actually makes me it actually makes me fundamentally very frustrated and angry, both personally and on their behalf, and I find that really motivating. Two, what I like to call a problem that matters. So I like working on problems that are kind of fundamental problems in engineering and computing that might impact millions and millions of developers. So like, in the GraphQL days, it's client-server interaction. Like everyone has to deal with that. And, the other thing is that with this data pipelining, which is actually the core thing that we're talking about, kind of orchestrating the creation of production data assets, every company in the world has to do that to one degree or another. And also in terms of a problem that matters, like these assets that get managed by these platforms are the basis of the vast majority of decision-making in modern society, right? Or a lot of it, meaning that the dashboards that executives make business decisions on, how healthcare is priced, whether or not people get their mortgages approved, all these core societal functions are determined and managed by data platforms. And fundamentally, I thought they were all being built in kind of unsound ways with inferior tools. Like you kind of move from software engineering to data engineering. It kind of feels like you're going backwards, like a decade in time in terms of the efficiency of the process as well as its integration into a proper engineering process. The other thing I really liked was properties that I like working on tech is where the technology I'm working on has kind of a strategic point of leverage in the organization. Like I always like to think like if this project I'm working on doesn't shift to the org chart in some way, I'm not as interested in it. Like I like the cross product of technology and organization. And, GraphQL is a lot like that. Because there's this natural choke point for all client-server interactions. And I thought the orchestration layer served that role as well. The orchestration layer is very interesting in data platforms and data pipelining because it invokes every single computational engine, which in turn touches every storage engine. And then any data practitioner who's putting data pipeline or an asset into production has to interact with the orchestrator in some way, shape, or form. Because all data comes from somewhere and goes somewhere. And so, it was kind of this unique mix of properties that made me super interested in the space. And I thought it really motivating.
Wow, what a great story. And fast forward to 2024, and of course, that landscape of data orchestration just continues to evolve at a rapid pace. So I'm curious, as someone who's been in this game for so long, and you're right in the eye of the storm even now, what key shifts have you observed, and how are you uniquely trying to address some of these changes too?
So I think the one of the dominant themes since the company was founded in the last 5 or 6 years is that I think there's general acknowledgement that data engineering and data platforms in general must be driven more by a software engineering process. And I think we were ahead of the curve on that, I guess. And that gives, me some, quite a bit of comfort, I guess. I think the other thing that's happening is that, we see tools like Airflow, which is kind of the incumbent in the space, they are kind of expanding to what we've been focused on from the beginning, which is making the orchestrator a much more feature-filled control plane that is much more aware of the assets that are produced by a data platform and therefore has integrated lineage. They've made acquisitions in this area. So, the competition is certainly, fast and furious. But I guess like the other thing that all is true, but the other thing that's happened is like a lot of the fundamental problems that we talk about still exist today. Like if you go into a team at a company that's building their internal data platform, they are still dealing with nuts and bolts issues about just like, how do I make at a very basic level the pipeline authors that I serve efficient and productive? There is just still so much work to do in this area.
Wow. Now I'm curious, how do you envision the roles of data engineering and data orchestration evolving in tandem with this growing integration of AI and machine learning in business operations. It feels like there's something happening here too, right?
For sure. So in terms of ML, specifically, so I'll either the kind of same thing, but I'll tackle them separately. So more traditional ML, among our cloud customer base, we ask them what they use Dagster for, and 90% of them say ETL and analytics, and that makes sense. But 50% of them also say that they use for ML, and 40% for what I'll call, what we call, we use these words and let them self-identify production applications. So 90% traditional ETL and analytics, 50% ML, 40% production use cases. And that adds up to more than 100%. So that means multi-use case in the norm. And 50% of our users are using us for ML. So one kind of theme that we see is there was an article that hit Hacker News a few months ago that said, ML ops is mostly data engineering. And we couldn't agree more. So we really view ourselves as a data engineering tool, and that we want to do the data engineering component of the ML workflow, and that means building the data pipeline. So for when you're building an ML model, right? In general, you're building a data pipeline, but just the last step or maybe a middle step for inference is producing a model instead of a data set. But the fundamental kind of process is very similar. I think the other theme here is that in AI and, kind of going to more generative AI tools, where the companies are figuring out how to integrate AI capabilities into their systems, and the way that they can differentiate beyond the publicly available LLMs is to actually feed their own proprietary data into their own models. To just a simple example would be training a model on the internal knowledge graph of your company so that you can ask questions about it, right? In order to do that, you need to be able to take the data that's in your systems and transform it into a form that your training pipelines can ingest. And that fundamentally is building a data platform and doing data engineering, which is our bread and butter. So because so much of the value will be having your proprietary data in a format that can be ingested and interpreted by ML engines, we think that, AI only increases the value of data platforms in a company.
Well, and considering the current state and future potential of open source in an era of SaaS, where do you see the greatest opportunities and challenges here? Anything that stands out to you?
In terms of open source in SaaS, I still think the opportunity with open source is, especially when it comes to dev tools, is it's a adoption accelerant, and you can get people to adopt it, especially early adopters, early in a technology's life cycle, get the feedback on it. And then also open source makes the notion of adopting that tool for critical infrastructure much less risky from the standpoint of the adopter. Because if, say, the company went away or the company started overcharging for a hosted SaaS service or something, the company could still kind of move back to a pure open source on-prem solution for their utterly essential business critical workflows. I think that is the opportunity of why it makes sense.
And at Dagster Labs, there you operate an open core business model. So I'm curious, what are the challenges and rewards of maintaining that delicate balance, especially in a rapidly changing tech landscape? Anything you could share around that?
Yeah, so I think managing an open source community and the expectations around it can be challenging. One is that, a community has kind of a life of its own. You make sure that it remains like a positive, good place. And that involves leadership and being thoughtful about how the community evolves. I think also, you really have to think carefully about clearly communicating how you divide between what contributions you're going to make in open source and then what the business model is, and be very transparent about the incentives and how you think about things. because I think that your users understand that there has to be a viable business model behind it, but they just want clarity, understanding. They want to be able to model and predict your behavior on that front. And that, doing that is always is often a challenge.
And on behalf of engineering founders that could be listening anywhere in the world, I'm curious, I've got to ask this question. How do you navigate that dilemma of leading the company's vision versus the day-to-day running of the company? Any strategies you found effective? Have you been able to walk away from the technical side, or is it still dragging you back in?
Well, I mean, for me in particular, I was the solo founder and CEO for about 4.5 years. And then in October of last year, I actually made my head of engineering the CEO of the company, and I'm CTO now. So I have definitely moved on from as much, doing the day-to-day management of all our different kind of vertical functions. And that is Pete's job now. So I guess, one answer is what advice you have. Well, one piece of advice is that, or what I did is I made someone else CEO after a while. But I can speak as it is in terms of, it's a very large question when you're operating as founder CEO about this balance of leading the vision versus day-to-day running of the company. I think obviously hiring is incredibly important, and trying to push down as many day-to-day ops as possible to your immediate management staff is super critical. And I think the other thing is really important to do time management. When day-to-day running in a company, there's just like a certain amount of time that is going to be doing what I'll call chores, one-on-ones, et cetera, as well as some reactive work that just always comes up. And I think you need to set realistic expectations and goals around how much of your time is going to be chores and reactive work, and psychologically kind of become at peace with that, and then build on that and carve out as much time as that you feel like you need to do bigger picture vision stuff.
Love that. And of course, data and ML engineering are increasingly driving decision-making in businesses and indeed society, arguably, as well. But are there any best practices that you'd recommend for building robust and scalable data engineering tools? Because we've seen how some get it wrong, but I'm interested in how you, or any advice you can offer around some of those best practices.
Well, obviously you should, adopt Dagster and they'll solve all your problems. But no, I think that, again, it's a very broad question, but I think it's really important to think thoughtfully about the software engineering process that you set up in your data platform, and think about it from the standpoint of the day-to-day experience of someone who's trying to do real work in the platform that you're kind of putting together. Like, can this person make a change to the business logic of the system without a massive amount of fear? Do they know if they're going to break anything before they push it to production? Just think about the day-to-day experience of these very basic questions. And then the other thing is how do you, once you have that sort of process set up, kind of the end goal here is to enable end-to-end ownership of data pipelines by those data practitioners and keep a centralized team out of the loop. Because I think the idealized state of one of these data platforms is where you have the people who are actually building the pipelines co-located organizationally with the stakeholders who depend upon the data out of those pipelines. And then you have a centralized platform team that's effectively an enablement team. And so I think that, a clear anti-pattern here is where there's one centralized data team who's just fielding requests for data sets from all different other aspects within the business, and they don't have enough context to know what's going on. And those business units don't feel like they control their own destiny. So, think about it from like go through the customer experience of being a developer on the platform, and then think about how that developer could kind of be self-sufficient while co-located next to a business unit that they serve.
And looking ahead, if I was to ask you to look in my virtual crystal ball, what would you say are the big milestones or innovations that you might anticipate in the field of data orchestration? And how might they impact the way that businesses operate in the future? And again, it's a huge question. I think it's an answer that everyone's searching for. But what do you anticipate happening here?
Yeah, so I think when we talk to business leaders who are thinking about their data platform strategy, the phrase that resonates with them the most is that they need their single pane of glass, right? Right now, their data platform is this sort of like a Rube Goldberg machine where they don't know what's happening and there's tons of chaos and no one knows kind of the ground truth about what's going on in the world. And they want a consolidated view that both, not just in terms of UI, but also a system of record that they can program against and like set up business logic against, that can really stitch together this, what before was this crazed, disorganized system into like this single unified view where you can understand your data assets and pipelines that span the entire organization. And I think that will make everything work much more fluidly as different parts of the business depend on each other in terms of, the outputs of data from one business unit are interesting to the other one, as well as just like massive organizational productivity purposes and be able to like understand what's going on in the system. So, that's where we're really looking forward is like, really setting up our system, Dagster, in terms of being the centralized control plane, the single pane of glass, so you can kind of run your entire data platform and then leverage that to do things like cost control, understand what the structure of your system is, and in data governance and having a single source of truth for all your production data assets, rather than just kind of like a widget that makes you build pipelines more efficiently.
Well, a huge thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to share your insights. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one final gift to everyone listening, and that is a book that we can add to our Amazon wish list. Every guest leaves a book that they recommend. What would you like to leave everyone listening with?
Well, I guess he's a controversial figure now, but love him or hate him, I do recommend reading Walter Isaacson's Elon Musk book. If nothing else, for the SaaS founders out there, if you think your life is tough and the mission of your company is tough, just read about, what it took to get SpaceX off the ground. It might put your problems in perspective a little bit. But, it's kind of that was kind of the book I read recently that comes to mind.
Awesome. I'll get that added straight to our Amazon wish list. And before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about Dagster Labs, there's so many different URLs, etc. out there at the moment. If people want to find out more information about that, contact your team, etc. Where would you like to point everyone listening?
Yeah, Dagster.io is kind of our main site about the project and the company. And then if you also Google, we have a very active Slack community. And then also, the core framework is open source. So if you Google GitHub Dagster, you'll hop right into our GitHub repo.
Awesome. Well, I'll add links to all those things so people can find you nice and easily. And can't thank you enough for coming on today, talking about the state of data orchestration, the future of open source in the era of SaaS, and also operational convergence of ML, AI, data engineering. So many exciting things happening in that world. Just thank you for helping me and everyone listening make sense of it all. Thanks for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So as we wrap up today's enlightening conversation with Nick, I think it's clear that the landscape of data orchestration and the role of open source platforms in modern technology are both complex and ever evolving. And Nick's insights into the operational convergence of ML and AI and data engineering, alongside that delicate balance of leading a visionary tech company, for me sheds light on the multifaceted nature of technological innovation. But what does the future hold for open source platforms like Dagster, and how will they continue to influence the realms of data and ML engineering? As I leave you with those thoughts, I want you to share your perspectives and join the conversation, and let me know how you see these technologies impacting your world. And as always, you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going. But that's it for today, so big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.